Hello and welcome to our webinar on Poison Center notifications, going beyond the transition period. I'm Adam Elwan and I'll be your host today. Let's take a look at the program. So after my short introduction, Heidi will talk about the current topics that are relevant to Poison Center notifiers, hoping many of you are with us here today. This includes revisions to the CLP guidance, enforcement updates, and the impact of the end of the transition period. Next, Hugo will give a short IT update. He'll be covering the PCN format, the UFI generator, and an update to the S2S documentation, so system-to-system documentation, as well as a few other topics that I hope you'll find useful. I'll then wrap up before we end the presentation part of the webinar. Now, the webinar will be kept open for questions until 12:45, so we can answer whatever is left in the chat. And you will be able to send your questions also through our contact form, but more about that later. So more specifically, what can you expect today? So we'll be covering recent changes to Poison Center notifications following the CLP revision. We'll also talk about updates on our Annex 8 guidance and other support material. You'll also gain some insights into the unique formula identifiers, or UFIs, to help you manage them better. And we'll be talking about upcoming IT changes that may impact your operations, as well as give some advice on recurring questions we receive in our help desk. Our team is here available with me throughout the webinar and will be replying to your questions in the Q&A chat. So as mentioned, you can send your questions throughout the event. You can do that by going to slido.com and using the event code PCN2025 or by scanning the QR code on this slide. Now, we can only cover questions within the scope of the webinar. If anything is out of scope, you can still ask it using our contact form at eca.europa.eu/contact. A Q&A document with answers to all the questions will also be published after the event. So rest assured, if your question is not answered by the time we close, you'll find your answer in the published Q&A. I'd also like to ask you to fill in a short feedback form that is open already now and you can fill in during the event. The presentations from today are already available on our website, so you can download the slides from there, and the video recording will be playable right after the event from the same broadcast window that you're following through now. All right, I think it's time to start our first presentation. So I'll now hand over to Heidi, who'll talk about current topics for Poison Center notifiers. Heidi, over to you.
Hello, my name's Heidi Rasakari, and today I would like to present to you in this webinar some of the current topics that are relevant for Poison Center notifiers. In particular, I would like to share with you some of the recent changes to the CLP regulation. We'll also look at the upcoming guidance changes, as well as touch upon the transition period which recently ended from the beginning of this year. We'll take a brief look at the enforcement project that's ongoing, as well as a very important topic on UFI management, and finally, finishing with some reoccurring help desk issues. Let's start with the CLP revision. So, of course, we all are aware that the CLP regulation was recently revised, and in particular I'm now referring to Regulation 2024/2865 of October 2024. For Poison Center notifiers, the main areas of change that need to be, that were addressed in the revision are those that were looking at data gaps and in particular areas of non-compliance. So primarily for Poison Center notifiers, it is Article 45 and Annex 8, and those changes within those provisions, but of course it's not limited just to these. It did enter into force already on the 10th of December 2024, but there are a number of staggered application dates which we will also look at today. First up, Article 1 of the CLP revision, Purpose and Scope. A new point F has now been introduced, and this explicitly mentions obligations to provide Poison Center notification information. In particular, it says the obligation is for downstream users, importers, and distributors as well to make this information available to the appointed bodies. The application date is from the 1st of January 2027. And then if we move on into Article 4, in the general obligations, a new paragraph 11 has also been introduced, and this is not specifically related to poison center notifications, so this is across the board. And it states that a substance, or for poison centers, a mixture shall not be placed on the market unless a supplier established in the union is identified on the label. So in essence, a supplier in the EU needs to ensure that all of the CLP requirements are met. And this, again, is to avoid data gaps, to avoid obligations also being placed on the consumer. And in particular, where we see this most relevant is for example, direct online sales from a non-EU vendor. Now, this topic will be further covered in guidance, in particular the guidance on labelling and packaging, which will be made later available in the year. The application date for this is the 1st of July 2026. Coming into Article 45 now, it was rewritten, and we have a new point to cover. We have Article 45 1C. This covers the potential information gaps as a result from distribution activities. In particular, these activities where a distributor may place on the market across a border or in another member state, and if they partake in any relabeling or rebranding. Now, while submission obligations exist then for these economic operators, it may be that no submission is required if that same information that has been changed by the distributor is included in their upstream supplier's notification. The application date here is 1st of January 2027. And then a few words on Annex 8 in regards to the CLP revision. The first topic here is standard formulas. Part A 2.0 now includes a clarification in the definition of what a standard formula is and when a mixture conforms with a standard formula. And the definition now includes that all components that are listed in one of the standard formulas must be included in the notification. Still on standard formulas, it further continues in Part B 3.1, which says that all of those components shall be notified even if it is known that some of those components will not or may not be present. And the caveat here is where in those cases where the indicated concentration range includes 0, as you can see highlighted in the table on the screen. Now remember, standard formulas are for concrete and cementitious products, and of course it's relevant to final products as well as for mixture components. And once again, the application date here is 1st of January 2027. Annex 8 also included some update reasons or new update reasons, and in Part B, Section 4.1, new reasons for updating a notification have been introduced, clarified, and it states now that when there are other changes to a mixture placed on the market which are relevant for an emergency health response, referred to in Article 45. So in essence, this needs to be determined by the notifier, and it may include, for example, any packaging, any change in the classification of components, the emergency contact details if they change. This is information that is relevant to poison centers and must be updated. The application date, 1st of January 2027, but I would like to remind that ECHA always recommends to keep the notification up to date with the latest information. On the topic of updates, I would like to just mention briefly, we do get a number of questions about this, updates stemming from the Commission Delegated Regulation 2023/707. So this entered into force already 2 years ago with staggered application dates. But the main point here is that it introduced new hazard classes also for human health, which is relevant to poison center notifiers. And this was endocrine disruptors, EUH 380 and EUH 381. So because it's for human health, these are now in scope for PCN or poison center notifications, whether it be a new submission or perhaps an update of information. Indeed, any new information that affects the risk management measures or the emergency health response by undertaken by poison centers needs to be updated in a poison center notification. So because the CLP regulation was completely revised, of course, all of our CLP related guidance is currently being updated. For poison centers, this is the Annex 8 guidance, otherwise known as the guidance on harmonized information relating to an emergency health response, which we'll talk about in the coming slides. But also there is the introductory guidance on the CLP regulation, the guidance on labeling and packaging, the guidance on the preparation of dossiers for harmonized classification and labeling, and finally the guidance on the application of CLP criteria. I'll also mention that if you are following the guidance updates, you can visit our website, in particular the guidance section on the website, to see the status of the different guidance documents. For the Annex 8 guidance, we have updated mostly based on the parts of the CLP that were revised, but of course we have removed a number of pieces of outdated text, and this outdated text is coming from the end of the transitional period, but also the compliance dates have ended. And in addition to that, we've also clarified and aimed to improve readability. We are working with relevant experts and interested stakeholders, otherwise known as the PEG or Partnered Expert Group, and we have conducted a written consultation with them. We have received their comments and we are in the process of working with those comments, which we will then revise the draft guidance and make it available for further consultation at Caracal and Forum. And we plan to publish the English version of this document later this year. A few words on the transition period. Of course, fairly straightforward for importers and downstream users that from the 1st of January 2025, all existing national notifications must be replaced with an Annex 8 notification and include a EUFI on the label. Now, this may mean that some products in the warehouses belonging to the importers and downstream users may need to be relabeled with the UFI, for example, with stickers, in order to be CLP compliant. It is also understood that these importers and downstream users will cooperate with their distributors to ensure that the mixtures are indeed CLP compliant and the UFI is affixed to the label. From the distributor's perspective, again, from the 1st of January 2025, all stock that they have on the shelves must be CLP compliant and contain the UFI. This is in line with Article 4.9 and Article 4.10 of CLP, which states that the supply chain shall cooperate to meet CLP requirements and that only CLP compliant mixtures can be placed on the market. So this also may mean that distributors will have the obligation to check with their suppliers and ensure that the UFI is on the label. Just a little update on the enforcement project here. There is a PCN pilot project by ECHA's Enforcement Forum. It is ongoing. There is no new news here, but just as a reminder that inspectors are checking if notifications have been made and they are verifying the labels of mixtures. This is a 6-month project which will end in June this year, and the findings will be published later at the end of this year. So do subscribe if you haven't already. Do subscribe to ECHA's News so that you can stay updated with the latest information about this project. I'd like to spend a little time here talking about managing the UFIs. This is, of course, a very important topic for the poison centers, and sometimes we see questions in the help desk. So we have devised an infographic containing tips on how to manage your UFI correctly. So I will go over briefly now just a few points here that I think is important to share. And the first one is know your UFIs. Make sure that you are using the correct VAT number or the company key and the correct formulation number for your mixtures. Quite often we have seen cases where consultants or other third parties may be generating a UFI on behalf of another company, and VAT numbers can get a little mixed up. So it's really important that you agree on whose VAT is being used when you are creating your UFI. Managing your UFIs. It's really important to have a system in place that documents how a UFI was generated, and as well as how it's assigned to different mixtures and mixture formulations. This means that this management system should be able to track not only your own UFIs, but also any UFIs that you may receive from suppliers if you are using, for instance, a mixture in mixture. Reuse wisely. Okay, of course, it's possible that a UFI can be reused in the supply chain under certain conditions. The main condition here is that the UFI can be reused as long as the mixture composition remains the same. That said, it's also expected that other relevant information also remains the same, such as the classification and the pH, for example. So please reuse wisely. And finally, review the submission warnings. When making a submission through the ECHA submission portal, the database will actually perform a series of checks with the submission with the information that has been provided in the submission against the information that's already in the database. Now, many occasions a submission will be made and it will be successful, and or it may be successful and contain some of these warnings. Now, these warnings are something that should not be ignored. Just because the submission was successful, you really do need to go back and have a look at some of those warnings. There could potentially be an issue. If you do see some warnings, then we encourage you to investigate a little bit further. So for example, on the screen, there's a few quality rules. These are the warning rules. If you do see some of these quality rules, go back, check if you accidentally used one of your UFIs incorrectly. You may have used it in another mixture. You could also check if you used the supplier's UFI correctly. So instead of using it for the MIM component, you've accidentally used it for the whole mixture. So you could double check this as well. It could also be that the UFI that you generated and applied to your labels has also been used downstream or by another company, for example, a repackager or a distributor. So something to bear in mind. In any case, you are welcome to contact ECHA in case of any doubt. And finally, do check our support for common issues. What we see when we receive questions from the help desk, more often than not, these questions can or do contain the answer in our support material. In particular, not just the guidance, but also in the practical guide. For example, lately we have been seeing several questions on the foreign user. What is it? How does it work? So this can be answered in the practical guide, as well as other common recurring issues like how to report a CLP-related PCN number. These are for when you have wish to make an update following a significant change in the composition of your mixture. Another question that we see at the moment coming up is, how do I transfer notifications from one legal entity to another? We actually also have a Q&A which answers this question very well. And the other point to consider, while the ECHA Help Desk is available to answer your questions, the national help desks are also available to answer your questions as well. Not just from a regulatory viewpoint, but also on how to create a dossier. So please do visit our support page. More often than not, you will probably be able to find the answer more quickly by looking at the support available. So I do encourage you to make use of that support. And that's all I have today. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll hand the floor over now to my colleague, Hugo Vara.
Hello and welcome to this webinar. My name is Hugo Vara and I'm part of the Poison Centers team here in ECHA. Today I will present you the latest IT developments for the Poison Center IT solution. I'll guide you through the PCN format and the upcoming release for it. I'll also guide you through the changes on the format and the Euclid. And for those using the Euclid Cloud instances, I will give you some recommendations and tips. I'll also talk to you about the latest UFI generator developments. I also have some guidelines and recommendations for the users of the IT S2S system, and also talk about
the EC number changes that are upcoming, and at the end, I'll talk to you about the planned maintenance release that we are having. Before describing the format changes, I would like to remind you that the Poison Center format is a customized format within the Euclid format. The format supports different legislations in Europe and also outside of Europe, as you can see from the picture on the screen. There are two main releases per year of Euclid, one major release in April-May, and their service release towards October. In the release in April-May, we can introduce format changes. The new Euclid format will be available towards the end of May. You can find detailed information packages on Euclid website where proposed format changes are available ahead of the go live. This can help you to get ready and update your systems if necessary. We will also publish a PCN format version 7 on the PCN website. This, as said before, is a subset of the PCN format of the Euclid format that you will have. We recommend you to always upgrade to the latest format so you have a smooth submission process. The first format change that I would like to bring to your attention is the addition of the format. It's the addition to the format of the combined hazard classes. As you can see on the screen, these classes are now combined, and you can select them to classify your mixture, which helps the Poison Center to formulate an emergency health response. As mentioned before, there have been changes to Part B of Section 4.1 on the legal text. To address those changes, we have included new practical update reasons that can be used when necessary. These are to be determined by the notifiers and may include change in contact details, change in packaging details, change in product category, and change in classification of components. For those of you using Euclid Cloud instances, I have a couple of recommendations to make in this slide. I'd like to remind everyone that the subscription is terminated after 3 years of known usage, so please pay attention to the reminder email that is sent to you to avoid data loss. It's enough to log in once in a while, so the instance is kept and you don't lose your data. Regarding the Euclid format in the Euclid Cloud instances, the format is updated automatically. Due to the high number of instances, it can take up to 6 weeks to upgrade your instance. So please wait, and I can let you know that ECHA is improving the procedure starting from the release already in 2025. We have also updated the UFI generator on January 2025, so it can cater for Belgium VAT starting with number 1. Now, for a system-to-system update, I would like to tell you that 85% of the submissions for Poison Center notifications are done via the S2S channel. We have noticed that some companies, when transitioning from one submission channel to the other, face some issues, so I would like to give you some guidelines and recommendations to avoid those issues. Start by saying that ECHA allows the transition of system. So you can move from one Euclid Cloud submission to S2S submission. The ECHA systems allow that. Companies should avoid resubmitting a new notification, since this leads to duplicate and inconsistent data for the Poison Centers. In this situation, ECHA does not recommend the use of the disabled submission feature. Software providers should follow the ECHA recommendations to adapt their systems. Such recommendations are now described in an Annex F of the S2S manual. You can also join our growing LinkedIn S2S community for more tips and share of information. There is also an EC number format change coming up. More information can be found on the ECHA website, and specifically for the Poison Center, there is an impact on the Business Rule 525 that we'll need to adjust to be able to digest the new format. As I'm speaking, there is a maintenance ongoing on the ECHA IT systems. The systems will be down, and you can find more information on the ECHA website. This concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
We've reached the end of the webinar. Thank you to our speakers and to you for joining us today. Now, before we close, here are a few take-home messages from the presentations that you've been listening to. First and foremost, now that the transition period has ended, it is really important to be aware that all mixtures on the EU market must now be CLP compliant. Please also remember that UFI management is the cornerstone for Poison Center operations, so it's important to get it right. Stay tuned to our news on guidance and enforcement. We'll be sharing the latest updates and important information that you don't want to miss. For those interested in updates to Poison Center notifications in Euclid, we have an upcoming webinar on the 28th of May, so be sure to tune into that. If you experience any system-to-system S2S issues, contact your service provider for assistance. They are equipped to help you resolve any problems you might face. Lastly, don't forget to use our available support. Most solutions can be found in our Q&As or the practical guide, so be sure to check those resources first. As mentioned at the start, you can find the presentations already on our website, and the video recording will be available right after the event. We'll also be keeping the webinar open until 12:45 Helsinki time to reply to any remaining questions. And if your question is not answered by the time we close, we'll be publishing a Q&A with answers to everything on the event page. We'll inform you through our weekly news bulletin when the Q&A is available, so make sure to subscribe to that at eka.europa.eu/subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye from Helsinki.